Okay, this is the third video in which I want to discuss the parallel structures of grieving people in Chaucer's book of the Duchess. And in this video I want to discuss the poet himself. Now, never once in the poem does he call himself Chaucer. So we can discuss, we can call him the narrator or the poet. And we can call him the poet by virtue of the fact that he wrote the book. So the very fact that the book exists implies that this person who couldn't think right at the beginning, who couldn't imagine anything in his head, who didn't want to do anything and couldn't do anything, not even sleep at the beginning, has somehow reached a resolution to his problem because the book is created. Now, how will you create the book if you are not able to even think and imagine and rhyme and write and work? So the very fact that the book is finished and that we read the poem implies that we are to understand that the poet has healed. How does this poet heal from his loss? Now, if Alcyone gives us a model of someone who is completely destroyed by the loss, and the Black Knight gives us a model of someone who has escaped death but is still trapped in a cycle of grief, you are to view what he is going through as a cycle. And if you remember at the beginning of the poem, when you see him first, you see him go through the cycle of being trapped, white, and then turning green for lack of blood, and then thinking to himself and arguing with himself, so to speak, and then saying something in rhyme, and then coming back out of it, so that he finally is able to talk to the person who approaches him in the dream. So there is a cycle of grief that the knight is trapped in, yet the knight doesn't die. So what does he do that Alcyone doesn't? And I suggested in the last video that the knight is able to remember, to piece together imagery of his lost one, which is an act of removing the experience from the realm of the real lived experience into the realm of the imaginary. There's a distance there, or a move that's introduced, and then this knight is able to cover it over with a artistic sheen, in that he designs the poem, the poetry he uses to describe Blanche. Okay, but see, this knight is not able to escape the cycle. The poet did, because he wrote the book. So what is the one thing that the poet does further or beyond that which the Black Knight does? And I suggest that the poet actually ended up, he is able to imagine, because he is now giving you the pictures of his dream. And he is able also to rhyme it, to describe it in rhyme, to cover over this scenario of images and scenes in the design and the structure of rhyme. And that's what the Black Knight does also. But the one thing that the Black Knight never does, that the poet does, is actually write it into a book. To actually transfer all of this into words that get put onto a material page. And I think that the book of the Duchess is suggesting that as a therapeutic exit from dealing with loss and grief. And what it's actually doing is it is re-rendering the experience in the terms of the artist, and then taking it out of the mind and putting it into another physical locale, objectifying it, distancing it from the person himself who's experiencing the grief. And it ends up being located and locked into a book that is outside of the body, outside of the mind. And I believe this is the one thing that the narrator does that neither Alcyone nor the Black Knight do. And because of that, we can suggest that this is the thing that heals him, because neither of the other two are healed fully. Alcyone not at all, the Black Knight halfway there. The narrator does everything the Black Knight does, plus one more thing: put it into a book and push it away from his body, so to speak. So we can make the case that that one act is what makes the poet, the narrator, fully recovered, as opposed to halfway there as the knight is. So those three parallel structures, when you recognize the parallelism of the two, Alcyone and the knight, and of the narrator, you can use the two that are fully described for you, Alcyone and the knight, to have something to say about the narrator. And that would be item analysis done in a fairly strong way. It certainly is possible, and I'm trying to push it into the realm of the probable, and I think I've succeeded with this interpretation of the Book of the Duchess in terms of item analysis.